Hey everyone, James Azar here with the CyberHub podcast for your weekly Tech Corner episode. I got a familiar face coming on the show in just a minute. But before we do that, have you subscribed to our podcast yet? Because if you haven't, you're missing out on a whole lot of fun. Do so now by subscribing on your favorite audio or video listening platform or watching platform. If you're watching us, we do this in video. So for those listening, you can actually see my ugly face. I have a voice face I do radio. I probably can't do a lot of TV. That's why they don't ever call me back from the TV news stations. CyberHubPodcast.com, where you can get all of our podcasts, including CISO Talk, our Tech Corner, our Practitioner Brief, and our Goodbye Privacy podcast, which is award-winning and coming with some revolutionary stuff right before the election, so make sure you tune in there as well. Joining me today, the one, the only, Robin Bienfait. Did I say it right this time? Bienfait.
Well done.
Bienfait. Oui.
Bienfait.
Bonjour, madame. Comment ça va?
Yes, oui.
Robin is the founder and CEO of Atlanta Tech Park. She's also a venture capitalist. She's a startup mentor. The lady has done it all. And if you've missed our first Tech Corner, then I feel bad for you because we're about to pick up somewhere where we're not going to go back. You'll just have to go and listen to our previous episode.
Exactly.
Robin,
we had a lot of fun. You missed out.
We did, and we weren't virtual for those. We were actually face to face. So you should go back and watch it because we did it. We went face to face, and no, we did not wear masks.
We were in my podcast room, and we were social distanced. So I think that we were following the CDC guidelines the best we could.
The best that we could. Thank you to Governor Kemp in this great state of Georgia for keeping us all safe and doing an amazing job of making sure that this state reopened quickly and efficiently, and our cases just continue to go down. So I guess good leadership does solve problems when they show up.
Yes.
Robin, welcome to the show again.
Thank you. Nice to be here again.
I'm excited for this one because we're really going to kind of... Last time we spoke a lot about your background and kind of some of your philosophy, but I do the practitioner brief Monday through Thursday. I read and I research a lot of stories, and I got to tell you, Robin, ransomware has increased by about 400 or 500%. It's been crazy.
Mainly since during if you want to call it the COVID, us working from home. I think that there's some people trying to have a side gig. And they're sending out ransomware. I actually think some of them are just ransomware letters and crypto accounts, and they don't actually have any ability to do anything. But I guarantee you, they're having a lot of people fall for it and pay up. So I don't know if they say if the crime pays, maybe that I wouldn't be in this side of things. It's not the space I would want to work in.
So I was on a phone call yesterday with some friends over at the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the FBI, and they say that they're getting so many ransomware calls. I
get letters. Yeah, if I get people saying, "Oh, I'm going to lock down your business," and I'm like, "Okay, I'm a website. You're really going to take me out?"
Well, and that's part of it, right? I think for a lot of businesses. That's not the case. But why do you think ransomware has just become so common, so like prevalent, so mainstream? I guess that would be the right word for it.
I was talking to a customer the other day, and we were trying to put in some new encryption technology in part of his processes. And one of the big things that they do, they work in the mortgage industry. And the mortgage industry has just been hammered with people spoofing the routing numbers and phishing attacks and actually making a lot of money in that space. I walked into one event, I was up in Chicago, and we were closing on a piece of property. And we walked into the closing attorney's office, and closing attorney's sitting there, the mortgage company is sitting there, and the real estate agent is sitting there, and they all have this real sour look on their face. Apparently they had just had an experience where they sold a house. A physician up in Chicago had just bought the house, and he had gotten several phishing attacks telling him to send his $125,000 in closing money really quick so that they could get all the paperwork buttoned up. And he did that. Funny thing is, all three of them are sitting there pointing at each other because none of them asked him to send that 125,000 for the closing. Somebody's email in that chain had got spoofed. Ours was being spoofed at the same time. Don't know which group it was generating from, but the people that are spoofing are getting really clever. The email looks like it's coming exactly from the same firm, just there was an extra S on the end of the email string. And they were talking to my husband and I as if we knew them. And they knew we were out of the country, and they knew we were traveling, and they knew we had gone to France. And we're doing the same things, hey, we've got to get this done. We want to get this done next week so that when you come to the closing, everything is already ready for you to sign. And so I made a decision, and the email was coming from the CEO of this little mortgage company. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to call him up on the phone because I didn't think we were going to do this. We were going to come to the room. The short story of it all is I called the number on the email because it was in front of me, and I clicked through. And the number on the email was actually spoofed as well. And it went to an office, and the office responded with the name of the company that I thought it would be. And I asked, well, then can I speak to this individual? And they said, well, we don't have anybody here by that name. And so the CEO of the company is not even in the office. So that tells you. But they're gone to these hackers or criminals or whatever you want to call them, have gone to the links of even setting up a fictitious office and spoofing the phone number on the email so that if you were to call, you would get the same feedback. Hey, you need to send the money. But the three people sitting there lost out, of course, on closing the deal. The doctor walked away because he lost 125,000 and he had to go figure out how to recruit. They call the FBI, they do all that kind of stuff, but everybody's pointing the finger at each other. Where I was going is I'm talking to a mortgage company who wants to put heavier encryption in so that they're not part of that spoof. And he says, Robin, at the end of the day, something will trick the individual. Something in the email, something in the message. And the weakest link in all of our security protocols and security capabilities is that human element. So if you can tell me how to get past that human element where the human doesn't read or feel the threat of the ransomware note, doesn't feel like, oh, tomorrow my business is going to close or they're going to shut me down. A lot of the ransomware, one here in Atlanta paid the money, paid the crypto. Wasn't a lot of money. It was kind of odd. It was $8,000 was one of them. Paid it, and they got a thank you note from the crypto company of customer feedback. Fill out our survey, see how we did. Thought that was kind of cute. But I told them, I said, guys, they're just going to do it again. Give them a couple of months. They'll come back for another 8,000, another 10,000, because they know that
you pay.
You don't feel prepared. And where this is about is you don't feel prepared to defend yourself. And you don't have the confidence in either whether your IT team or your CISO and what they've put into practice that you could thrive or survive a cyber attack or ransomware event. The city of Atlanta didn't pay. It took them over a month to get all their services back up and running.
It took
and when they traced it down, their weakest link was to a fire department that was out at the Hartsfield airport, a link that they had not secured.
Yeah, and that falls into and that was a really funny point blaming game, right? Because the city runs the airport, but then the FAA is in charge of different parts of the airport.
Exactly.
And it was a finger pointing game. But the city of Atlanta, I thought,
who's on first?
Well, I thought the city of Atlanta took a tough stance, and then they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. And
yes.
And they didn't realize just how bad their IT was. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that most of our elected officials don't understand technology.
Yes, I agree with that. And I would even say a lot of your small businesses don't really understand what their IT professional or team does within their business. What they feel and see every day is that more the help desk type of stuff. I got my password all screwed up, or hey, the printer is not working like it was supposed to be, or hey, I need more storage on my desktop. I'm trying to do something. They don't see the back office things that your IT or your cyber team is engaged in.
No, and they don't see the work that's needed to get that stuff done. A lot of companies don't even know if they have a backup, and they don't know how their backup is. Most companies, even mature organizations, don't even know how long it would take them to restore the data
Well,
in
and
the
I
event.
find those are the easy questions to ask. When I go in and I'm working with a company, the first thing I say is, so where do you back, what do you back up, and how often do you run backups? Oh, I'm sure we do that, Robin. Okay, and when was the last time you tested running your business from that backup? Well, I don't know if we've ever tested it. All right, well, where's that backup stored? And could the backup also be, which oftentimes in a true ransomware event, the backup is also contaminated or bricked?
Well, a lot of times people put the backup in the same place you put your other
Same
data,
environment.
right? You're
Yeah.
putting it in the same environment. You're like, well, do I need to put it in a different environment? Yes.
Yes.
I think mature organizations today will realize that you got to have multiple environments, and you really got to have like almost a blue and green environment where you're able to turn something. If something gets turned off, you turn on the switch somewhere else, and you're just letting the AC turn on essentially, and
And
you're
I
ready to
like
go.
that. If you ever got to look at Google's architecture, real network architecture, they actually have a three-pronged approach. They run the Google infrastructure from one site, and then within the next month, they switch that site completely off, and they run the Google architecture from their secondary site. And then the next month later, and I don't know if it's month or quarter, but they do the same thing. They shut that off, and then they go to their third site. So they've got this trifecta thing going on where and you think that's expensive, but today with the cloud environments that we have, you could actually have your business running in one cloud environment and being backed up to another cloud environment, which would give you that true separation and give you the autonomous that if somebody did come and lock up your environment from one infrastructure, you just switch to the next. And then your customers, they feel a little bump in the road, but not much.
Well, and the bump that they feel is nonetheless, if you're doing it monthly or quarterly, then it's like next to my house they built an electric substation, and in that electric substation they put a new fiber optic line, and the first house downstream from the fiber optic line is this guy's house. So awesome.
Were you
And so
happy? Jumping around?
I was ecstatic. Because I got to tell you something. We don't have cable, like we don't watch a lot of TV. We typically stream. I obviously do this podcast from my home now, and I upload videos to YouTube. I download. I stream obviously this podcast. I don't have any internet connection issues unless we're going across the ocean, and then
Yes.
dolphins and their sonar. But outside of that, we're my internet speeds have gone through the roof. Like I'm able to upload an hour YouTube video in 4 minutes. Upload.
That's wonderful.
It's unheard of.
So we've got a gig up and a gig down here at the park.
I love the park.
Yes, and at Atlantic Tech Park, we are going with Hargrave Fiber, and they're giving me a complete ring.
Right.
And so I made a comment to somebody who runs and puts some of their backup stuff here at the park. And I said, hey, guess what? We have an opportunity for dark fiber. And they sort of looked at me and said, dark fiber, why would I care about dark fiber? And I said, well, you're this type of industry. Dark fiber gives you a very fast connect to run real-time backloads and recoveries. And I said, if you ever got ransom, this is like the cat's meow with getting yourself back up and restored. Well, how much is that going to cost me? And It's like, well, how much of it is going to cost you if you were down for a day? So, you have to be able to have that conversation. And a lot of people don't understand. What does it mean to your business if you were to get and to be taking a hit? Not just take a hit. Take a hit for an hour. Take a hit. Pretend like you take a hit for a day. Would you be in business if your business took a hit for a week?
Not a lot of people can answer that. And most people will say, yeah, I'll be fine. And then they're there for a week, and then they realize a week becomes 2 weeks, 2 weeks become 3 weeks, 3 weeks become a month, and then a month becomes 2, and then they're out of business.
Well, the fires made me think, when I was working back at AT&T, I had this gentleman call me, and the fires in California, it was just ravaging the area and was starting to burn his building down. And he called me on the phone and he says, Robin, what am I going to do? I need to be able to have my business back up and operational somewhere. And I asked him, I said, where's your secondary site? I don't have a secondary site. And I said, so where are your backups stored? So that, we can find you a secondary site and bring you up anywhere you want to be. And he started crying. He says, I don't have backups. And so you're thinking, okay, so when you think about your business today, how much of it is in the digital space and how much you're going to lose if you were to lose your physical space. But if that's where you're keeping your digital environment and your information on your clients and your customers and your invoicing and all that type of stuff, that's why it's so nice to have a cloud environment, because if your physical environment does get attacked, then you have some level of resilience. But I was thinking that when we were having the 9/11 attacks, since tomorrow is 9/11, and I was being asked the same question when I was recovering AT&T's network for 9/11. I said, well, we can recover the wall, we can recover the stock exchange. Robin says, what do you mean you can recover the stock exchange? I said, well, it just melted down in New York, but I can switch the whole stock exchange to operate out of Chicago. So you could move the New York Stock Exchange to go work out of the Chicago Stock Exchange. Might have to move a few people, but you wouldn't be out, but maybe more than an hour. And the answer that came back to me is, well, no, we want to recover Monday morning in New York to show that our country hasn't been affected. And I said, well, wouldn't it be more impactful if you could show that you could recover anywhere in the United States? New York is the hub, and when it comes back, you will go back to New York. But you show more resilience if you can recover anywhere within minutes.
Yeah, you're so on point with the whole backup recovery issue, because so many times organizations don't think of backup and recovery. Oftentimes, they're not really considering the spend for backup and recovery. And even if you look at the CIS Top 20 or NIST, one of the top 3 things is backup recovery. Backup recovery is everywhere. Do it. Let me ask you.
I think some companies think of it as the boring thing to do. Nobody wants that boring job, or it sounds boring. So I had to, I ran AT&T's disaster recovery team along with running the global network. And I, every year was you're always given the budget hatchet. Then you got to figure out where in the budget. And everybody would always say, well, Robin, couldn't we get rid of our disaster recovery team? I said, absolutely not. And so I got very clever and I decided, something, I've got to get this disaster recovery team paying for itself. So I went and worked with the head of sales and the team out of marketing, and we decided that each one of our backup recovery, disaster recovery events, we called them an event, we would go around quarterly somewhere in the United States and recover part of the network. We decided to host it as a customer event. We would run the backup recovery event the day before, and then we'd invite customers and we'd host a huge event, and it started paying for itself. Because then the customers were able to come and see all the equipment and capability we had in the event that we did take a hit. And Katrina was a big event where we had to roll all that equipment in. 9/11 was a big event. But you think of all the hurricanes and fires and even the earthquakes out in California, having this type of resilience in your network infrastructure and with your network provider is huge. There is no other network provider here in the United States, and I can still say this about AT&T, that has this kind of resilience, not only in their algorithmic capabilities in their in their fiber and capability, but also in the physical aspects of knowing how to recover in a major event. And it's simple things. I did the one down in Katrina, and there's some rules of thumb that you play, and some of us that have done this for our lives, that we got them on the back of our hand. The first thing is you never send in, you never rely on the team that's inside the affected area. You have to send a new team in, so you have to have a team that's available outside the affected area. And so here I'm sending a team in into Katrina, and one of my guys calls me here in Atlanta, and I said, just drive up the street and buy about 30 Winnebagos. You're going to be outfitting them all with a lot of peanut butter and bread, because there's not going to be restaurants open. But we already knew we were going to do these things, and we all drove in because we couldn't get in the air at the time because they closed down the airspace. But we get out there, and one of the local Bell operating companies had called me at that time and said, Robin, we're getting ready to lose one of our physical sites due to the storm because we've run out of gasoline. And I said, great. I said, I'll send a truck over. Where do you need me to have this infrastructure sent? They gave me the address, and I said, okay, I'm sending over a full truck that should probably let you run for the next 72 hours. And then I kind of paused, and I said, okay, I thought in my head, well, he didn't have the gasoline that he needed, or the truck, or the vendor. I said, by chance, do you have a pump on site? Because I can't move it from the truck to your facility without a pump. And he got real quiet, and I said, okay, we'll bring a pump. So it's sometimes it's the simplest things that people don't think about is I've got to be able to function outside of the norm. And what if COVID has taught us the most during this period of time is how to think differently. And I think that's been a positive effect on all of us.
Absolutely. Robin, you work a lot with CIOs and CISOs, and you do a lot of different roundtables. What are some of the challenges you're still hearing from them now, post-COVID? I don't want to call it the new normal. I think that's a buzzword at this point. But what are some of the challenges that they're still facing or that they're dealing with that they need help with the most right now?
I think the reality for a lot of CISOs is they're still being pushed when they come in and say, hey, I need funding to actually get us to this maturity state, to get not only the business and the management team, but also the board to understand that to get to that maturity state is a progression. It's not a, hey, I got to go buy this one tool or this one technique. And a lot of the CISOs, I think they have a little bit of what I call battle fatigue, and they really don't know how to speak to the senior management team or the board without throwing, threatening things. Oh, well, we could get ransomed. These are the bad things that could happen. It's just true business resilience to have certain maturity levels within your infrastructure and the partners that you've chosen, and to be able to show that part of your operating model, and I think this goes back to architecting your environment accordingly. I love using Google as the example, only because they designed their architecture in a way that they could run at any one of the 3 sites. And by doing that in real time as part of their business norm or reality, they're always testing their backup and resilience capability. It's just part of their DNA. But now, I'm sure they've had moments where something got deployed or upgraded that they didn't like.
You bring up Google, and I appreciate Google's obviously architecture and infrastructure. I think that Google being a technology company that's based online, that derives off being available online,
back office,
right? That's their business.
Exactly.
and exactly. I think for a lot of other companies, you're more concerned, and you work a lot with startups, you know this. You go to a startup right now and you ask them, I think if we polled some of the startups in Atlanta Tech Park and we said, how many of you guys have a backup and restore and have tested it in the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? I think you might be surprised with the results. I wouldn't be. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like a lot of times organizations.
So yeah, but you know what? A lot of them, I asked the question. I said, "Are you running on AWS? Are you using some of AWS's capabilities and features?" Well, they're kind of expensive. And I said, well, in some cases, you've got to figure out where in your operating model that you could turn that expense on, because you're not going to get other investors to the table until you do that.
No, and and you bring up, that's a great point, because you see that to be kind of the common theme with startups is, we're a startup, we don't have a lot of money, we got to stretch every dollar. And some startups would rather spend that money on sales and marketing than on technology backup. And you can understand why, because they're between a rock and a hard place, right? Spend it on having a backup and restore. You know, your investors aren't going to be like, yeah, we see why you're spending it on backup and restore, but you don't have sales. So what good is the backup and restore if you don't have sales and marketing? And so, there has to be, I almost think like
sales and revenue in.
Right. Like, I'm almost thinking like the market's got to have a better answer for those companies. Like, there's got to be a solution where something comes in there and it says, hey, we run your backup and restore and it's really affordable and you don't have to worry about it. We do it for you. Everything is good. Does that make sense?
I would love to have a company like that. Yes. And even if it's something simple that the IT department could do.
Yeah, I mean, but how many startups really have a full-time IT person, or really have someone in IT that's dedicated to that?
They don't, but sometimes they'll have somebody clever enough. Yeah, they'll have somebody clever enough that they can order maybe, a side drive that's got a nice bit of storage on it, and at least run something monthly so that they can at least copy the history and at least some of the little extra property to the side. If they're at least doing the minimum, and that's really roughly a minimum, then if they were to have some type of impact, it gives them some ability to come back or spring back.
I can second that. I feel like, and I don't want to get kind of like in the rotating circle of death around what companies can and can't do. I feel like if you're listening to this podcast and you don't have a backup and restore, start planning it, start budgeting it, start including it. There's creative ways to do backup and restore that also don't cost you a lot of money. Something as simple as an external hard drive that once a week you plug in and you download all your data and you unplug it is just as good. You don't have to go with the fancy backup and restore. Just have somewhere where you've got data that's backed up somewhere.
Even if it's just even to some of your machines, I agree. So I have to tell you this story. When my husband started his aviation company, it was very small at the time. And I kept telling him, I said, you really need to have, backup capability. So he talked to his IT guy. He had one person doing this. He had a little AS400 in the closet somewhere that was running all of his environment. And he had been an attack of, somebody coming in and breaking the windows and stealing all the desktop equipment. It was just in a bad area. So he had a second attack, and I was like, because the first attack, he had to key all of his data back in. The second attack, he got hit, and I was all proud, and I said, wow, now you see you've got a backup tape. You don't have to key all of that back in. And he kind of had this funny look on his face. I said, what's the matter? He said, well, they stole the AS400 out of the server closet. And I said, okay. He said, the backup tape was still in the machine. his process was to put it in his pocket and take it home every night, but instead he left it in the machine, and the thieves came in and actually physically stole the server. So it's like, okay, so you have to follow that little thread of where is it at, and is it in a separate environment in a different space. But for entrepreneurs, it is critical that if you're building something new and you have intellectual property, even if it's just once a month, back it up somewhere. Storage, remote drives and storage is really cheap. Go put it in a safety deposit box once a month and lock it up somewhere that's fireproof. Something that gives you a little bit of ability to sleep at night, that you have an ability to bring your business back online in the event you were attacked or had some sort of negative event.
You know, I would say one of my best practices for backups and restore is don't wait to back up at night. Backup during business hours. Backup while you're working. A lot of people have this like fake, like this, I don't know where it comes from, but we'll back up every night at midnight. And I'm like, why? Why are you doing it at midnight? Why aren't you doing it at noon or 1 p.m. or 2 p.m.? It makes more sense than doing it at midnight, because if I'm going to launch an attack, most attacks happen overnight, and then when you log in the morning, you see the ransom note. So kind of keep that in mind. A ransom note just doesn't randomly show up in your inbox midday. Yeah. Robin, let's talk a little bit.
With the new structure, you can run a backup while you're running in real time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's available. It's right there. It's handy. Robin, let's talk a little bit about our Cyber Fintech event in March, which we started talking about last time we got together. But Cyber Fintech, Atlanta Tech Park, March 8th through the 10th. It's an in-person event. Yes. By then, I think that COVID will be over between November 4th to November 10th, just around that time period. We'll see COVID kind of die off the headlines. And it will no longer be an issue. The fact
I actually think, with all the stuff we've got going on, we'll have herd immunity before the vaccine will come out. So I think we'll be safe either way.
But I think in Georgia, we've already seen part of that herd community. I think like in the big counties like Fulton County, DeKalb, Gwinnett,
yes,
and Cobb County. It's burned through those counties. It's burned through them. I mean, this is where the large outbreak numbers were 3 months ago. It's gone. It's the same thing we're seeing in LA County. It burned through LA County in California, and now it's no longer there. But this isn't a conversation about COVID, although COVID is a very, very interesting topic, and we could talk about it for ages.
No.
Cyber Fintech event.
It is, and it probably warrants another whole separate session to itself.
It does. But I think so. For those who don't know, CyberHub Summit and Atlanta Tech Park are joining together to put together a 3-day event here in Atlanta, Georgia. People can fly in. There's great hotels right around the park with shuttles to the park. Peachtree Corners is a great, innovative, amazing city. That's really I love the bus tracks like by the park, and you feel like, even though Peachtree Corners is just about a 20 minutes out north of Atlanta, you feel like you're in a metropolitan area because of the way they've designed the technology center of Peachtree Corners. And so it's a very, very fun place. A lot of innovation in Peachtree Corners that people don't even fathom about.
We're a true tech hub. True Tech Hub, we work with Georgia Tech as well. So there's a lot of technologists out here. We have one of the 50 autonomous driving R&D labs tracks out in front of the building. That's part of the street. You'll see Ollie the trolley running up and down. We've got the autonomous driving scooters. You have to come and see that as well. You can get around in the area. But at the park, our 45,000 square foot global innovation center, we have the ability to host up to 1,500 people here at the site. We will be also providing, follow-up and all different kind of breakout sessions. So I'm real excited. It'd be great to see a lot of the C-levels that I engage with every other month in our roundtables. We have a cyber event that we're going to be hosting so that we can kind of keep cadence on cyber. But the reason I kind of cross the cyber with the fintech is it's just a great intersection for all technologists. Whether you love the cyber aspect of it, or you're in the payments or fintech space, or even you're part of a banking industry and you want to come see how maybe the technology you're putting forward would engage with some of these payment services. I think it's the best cross-section of not only talent and technology, but it's just going to be a lot of fun. And I'm excited to be able to see everybody again too.
Me too. I'm super excited. I will say that for full disclosure, my sister-in-law is getting married on March 3rd in Israel, so I will be flying in, and I will not be jet-lagged for this event, I promise.
Oh wow!
I'll be flying back from Israel like March 4th. I'll be here March 4th, and then
You're gonna bring us some falafels, right?
I will. We are going to go get falafels here shortly. In fact. But I will say this, folks. If you're wondering why Cyber Fintech, Robin just brought up some great points. I think beyond everything, we all know that cyber criminals are after money. Data is a way for money, but the way they work with payment companies, with fintech organizations, the way they attack them is they attack them to defraud them of money. We're right around the fourth quarter, right around skimming season for e-commerce websites where credit cards become far more vulnerable. This morning, Visa issued another e-skimmer warning that's going to be happening there. The fintech industry is a number one target for cyber criminals because it directly goes into dollars. And so people, I think if you're in the fintech industry, coming to this event, even if you're not within the cyber, if you're within operations, if you're within innovation, being able to see how can cyber integrate with your innovation, with your ideas, with the ways you're looking to change the way fintech is done is absolutely priceless. And when you take security at the front end of your product development, you not only come under budget, but you also eliminate the timeline restrictions when you come to innovate a product. I built a fintech company where cyber was at the forefront of what we did. We never had any issues with security because security was at the concept of the very beginning, at the foundation of our work. And I think for anyone doing this, now is the time to come March 8th through the 10th. The link is here below on this podcast. You can pre-register now. You can contact myself or Robin. If you're interested to speak, you do that. If you want to sponsor the event, we'll be glad to speak to you about that as well. We are looking for sponsors for the event as well. And I think we've got a great virtual program leading up to the event as well, where we're going to be hosting beyond just these podcasts, a bunch of different webinars and all kinds of different stuff. So if you're, again, a sponsor and you're interested in being part of the event, just touch base with either myself, Robin, Nashley, or Julie. Would be happy to help you with it. I think this is going to be it's really going to be a unique event for Atlanta. Because it's really bringing everything together. We're hoping to get a few more universities involved in the event. And we really want to bring in academia. We want to bring in industry. We want to bring in cybersecurity. And we want to bring in innovators. And you put them all in a room for 3 days with a little bit of social distancing, some good hand sanitizer, and some good food and beer and alcohol. And life gets a lot better.
Exactly.
Life gets a lot better. Robin,
and
thanks so much for
that cross-section of industry with academia is phenomenal. Great things come of it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Robin, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. She'll be back with me again next month, folks. So maybe next month we'll talk a little bit about COVID. Maybe we'll talk about something else. I don't know if you want to hear Robin talk about something. If you got some questions, you can also tweet. Ask us, go to our website, cyberhubpodcast.com. You can submit everything there through our contact us page as well. That's it for us here today, folks. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Robin, thank you for coming on board. Tomorrow is 9/11, folks. In fact, this podcast will be published on Friday, 9/11. So, or Saturday, September 12th, because I won't be posting anything on 9/11. I did do my 9/11 post this morning. So if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen. 9/11 changed my life. I know it changed a lot of people's lives in this country. And so tomorrow, 9/11, I won't be posting anything. You'll be listening. If you're listening and you're listening until this very end, today's September 12th, but we do take a moment and we remember the fallen victims, the 2,977 lives that were lost on that day, and then the thousands more of brothers and sisters in the armed forces and intelligence agencies and people who worked to uproot evil and terrorism from that part of the world who've lost their lives since that day. I yearn for the day when we all find peace, love for each other, and people that are different with us, and this world learns a little bit more tolerance. But until then, folks, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. Robin, thank you so much for being here. And God bless America.